This presentation, titled All Management is Now Risk Management, Even Quality Management, comes to us from Greg Hutchins. Greg is the founder of 800compete.com, workingit.com, sermacademy.com, and qualityplusengineering.com. He is the risk evangelist who coined the expression future of quality risk and the founder of the Certified Enterprise Risk Manager Academy. Greg's company was certified by DHS for critical infrastructure protection, forensics, assurance, analytics. He's the author of the books Working It, Disruption Rules, Risk-Based Thinking, Value-Added Auditing, and ISO 31000, Enterprise Risk Management. And with that, take it away, Greg.
Welcome to All Management is Now Risk Management, Even Quality Management. My name is Greg Hutchins. I'm the instructor of this course, webinar. I've got a background in engineering, but most importantly, if you've got some comments or thoughts on how to improve, please reach out to me at 503-233-1012 or greg@800compete.com. So first, a little background on who I am and what we've done. I'm a professional engineer with Quality Plus Engineering. I'm the developer of Certified Enterprise Risk Manager Certificate. I'm the author of more than 30 books, including Supply Chain Risk Management, Value-Added Auditing, and Working It. We're the first company to be approved for critical infrastructure protection, forensics, assurance analytics, and we actually coined the expression, future of quality is risk. I'm also the founder of 800compete.com, which is a US by USA website and company, workingit.com, focusing on the future of business, CERM Academy, which is basically where you can get more information on the Certified Enterprise Risk Manager Certificate, and Quality Plus Engineering, our engineering company. So let's dive into it. We're going to cover these 5 areas. First thing we're going to talk about is all management is now risk management. Then we're going to talk about what is risk and risk management. Then, what is risk-based thinking? We're going to provide examples of risk-based problem solving and risk-based decision making, specifically using the 3 lines of defense. And then we're going to talk about what are your next steps in your risk management journey. So let's dive into it. A primary tenet of this course, and basically what we do, is that we believe that all management is now risk management. Let's talk about that. 20 years ago, we evangelized the future of quality risk concept. We wrote for Quality Digest, Quality Magazine, a bunch of other newspapers. And you could see one of our articles. Actually, it was a cover article many years ago in Quality Progress. Our message was risk was going to become part of the quality professional's toolbox. As the years went by, we changed the message a little bit, and we talked about how risk was part of all engineers' toolbox. Then COVID hit early in 2020. COVID impacted all businesses, and it impacted everyone. So our message changed. We basically now say that all work and all living decisions in COVID time are going to be risk-based. And the implication is that now all management is risk management, including quality management is really risk management these days. Now, this is really not anything new. 5 years ago, Ram Charan wrote a book called The Attacker's Advantage. And he basically said that taking control of uncertainty is the fundamental leadership challenge of our time. And boy, was he right. Because 5 years later, COVID hit, and all management now is risk management. In the next 4 or 5 slides, we're going to discuss and show you how risk now is the primary filter lens for all living and working decisions. So the first one is probably the most obvious, what we would call climate change risk. The challenge is that climate change risks include rainstorms like you see in Asia, fires that you see in California and Australia, floods in India and frankly in Europe, and then extremes of hot and cold. Now, interestingly, last week in California, in Death Valley, they recorded the highest temperature ever, or we could say in recorded history, of 130 degrees Fahrenheit in Death Valley. So the challenge of risk climate requires some risk-based decision making. Specifically, should we accept the risk of climate change and do nothing? Should we focus on resiliency of people and countries? Or should we do our best to eliminate carbon dioxide emissions? Well, really, the decisions will probably be a combination of all three. Another major change, or major risk, is what we would call artificial intelligence risk, otherwise known as AI risk. All of us have either a Siri, which is an Apple product, or an Alexa. These products essentially can answer almost any question. Why? Because they're connected to the internet, and they can do almost instantaneous searches for questions that you may have on demand. But just think, what would happen if every critical work position had an AI interface, and that interface was connected to a robot, and that robot had access to the entire web? So think about it. Your smartphone could become a work Alexa that could answer almost any question, look at all types of data and draw conclusions, and make decisions real time based upon the history of data for your position, your job, or your career. At that point, what would be your differentiator, your value add to an employer? So the challenge of artificial intelligence is for us, humans, to be able to do risk-based problem solving and to do risk-based decision making. Another challenge we're going to have very shortly is the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things consists of products that have an IP interface that can connect to the web. In other words, you'll be able to have one machine talking to another machine all throughout the world. Those machines, unfortunately, are hackable, accessible, and exploitable. So, quick story. We'll be discussing it in the next slide. It's called the pacemaker risk. But with the Internet of Things, we're going to make a couple decisions. Are we going to limit the number of products that have our IP interfaces, or are we going to change the design of these smart products so they're not hackable anymore? Key decision. Another type of risk we're going to have is what we would call, and it's an example of products, in this case, a pacemaker. A pacemaker is installed in somebody's body to monitor the frequency and the rhythm of their heart. If the heart goes out of whack, becomes too fast, it slows it down. If it becomes too slow, it makes it go faster. Pacemakers, by definition, are an IoT, smart product. The challenge is, if the heart is going too fast or too slow, the product manufacturer is informed, as well as your doctor. And at that time, the doctor can call you and say, hey, take this pill, take this prescription, do this, do that. But unfortunately, these pacemakers are also hackable. And there was a funny, it was an interesting premise to a mystery last year where somebody had a pacemaker, the perpetrator knew about that, hacked the pacemaker and killed the patient. So the smart decisions, risk-based decisions, for pacemaker risk challenge would be to have software encryption or software controls to be able to monitor, at least to stop somebody nefarious hacking into the pacemaker. In the next section, we're going to discuss the critical issue. What is risk and what is risk management? You can think of risk as two things: value creation, which is upside or opportunity risk, as well as value detraction, which is downside or consequence risk. Now, interestingly, how do most of us think about risk? Most of us think about risk in terms of downside, something bad happening. So let's discuss, why do we want to manage risk? This sort of diagram describes the challenge. The horizontal axis is time, the vertical axis is complexity. Complexity can also include volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and even ambiguity. And we have two lines in this chart. The horizontal line, you can think of as the basis of what quality management is all about. The basis of quality management is to ensure consistency. Consistency of product, consistency of processes, consistency of quality management systems. But there's a challenge. Consistency, meaning that straight line of existing processes, means that the processes are in control and capable of meeting requirements, which are the fundamentals of quality management. But here's what's happening. What's happening is that program and project complexity is increasing. You can see that on the top line. As it increases, we have greater variances. Greater variances in what? Project cost, project schedule, scope, technology, and even quality. The more variance we have, the more distance, the greater the delta, the greater the gap, the more risk we have in cost, schedule, scope, technology, and quality. That's the reason why a lot of what we would call fundamentals of quality management are changing. Quality management focuses on consistency. Existing processes that are in control and capable. However, the external environment is changing. It's creating more risks. And that's why we're saying that all management now is really risk management. So now let's define what is risk. Risk is the chance of something happening that will have an impact upon objectives. It is measured in terms of consequences and likelihood. And risk is also a situation or circumstance which creates uncertainties about achieving program objectives. You can think of that curve that we just talked about. Now, other definitions of risk include it's the possibility that an event will occur that can adversely affect the achievement of objectives. Let me provide a quick example. You're about to cross the street. Crossing the street, going from A to B, has some risks attached to it. The objective is getting to the other side of the street. But crossing the street has risks of cars going left to right, right to left. It has potholes in the street. You might have a policeman at the corner watching you if you're jaywalking. Each one of those is a risk. It's a risk that's impeding you, restraining you from meeting your objective. Many of these definitions that you'll see now dealing with risk deal with circumstances or events that stop you from achieving an objective, like crossing the street. So, what's risk management? Risk management you can think of as culture, processes, structures that are directed toward the realization of potential opportunities, think upside risk, and the effective management of adverse effects, think downside risk. This is the definition from ISO 31000. Another definition that you'll see from another risk management framework. This risk management framework is called COSO. It defines risk management as the identification, assessment, or response to risk to a specific objective. So let's go to the next section. What is risk-based thinking? ISO added risk-based thinking to ISO 9001 2015 5 years ago. It was a genius move, especially because it anticipated COVID and all of the disruption it's causing right now. Again, it proves that risk basically is going to be impacting quality management systems, it's going to be impacting standards. But there was one problem. ISO never defined what RBT or risk-based thinking is. This is where we come in. The challenge for ISO auditors is if you can't audit somebody's thinking, there's no evidence, there is no audit trail, unless, of course, you pass Mind Reading 101. And that's the challenge. There's no evidence, and there's no mental audit trail or process that somebody could use to indicate, yep, that complies with the requirements, or that's effective, or that's economic. So what should auditors do? In our practice, and we've been doing risk management for 20 years, we define risk-based thinking as two things. One, risk-based problem solving, and 2, risk-based decision making. Interestingly, the Institute of Internal Auditors at the end of 2019 said the top 3 items in an audit that we're going to focus on include enterprise risk management, cybersecurity threats and risks, and vendor third-party risk management. So a couple quotes about risk-based problem solving. McKinsey, the premier consulting company, said, problem solving is the core skill of the 21st century. This is something we all need, we all have to do. It's also a critical differentiator for artificial intelligence. And of course, quality auditing by definition is a type of problem solving. In much the same way, risk-based decision making. Risks and threats are much higher due to coronavirus. And as a result, more companies are reevaluating business models. Just look at the make or buy decision. A lot of folks have been buying products from China. What's happening? They're reshoring. That's an example of risk-based decision making. The figure on the right shows essentially a very quick example of what risk-based decision making looks like. It involves identifying the risk, accessing risk, controlling the risk, and reviewing the effectiveness of risk controls. So, in the rest of the talk, we're going to talk about risk-based problem solving and risk-based decision making through a process that we invented called ADA. ADA stands for, and it's an acronym for Architect, Design, Deploy, and Assure. And we're going to discuss that, especially in terms of a commonly used practice called 3 lines of defense. You can also think of ADA as being the risk equivalent of qualities, plan, do, check, act. So let's discuss ADA. ADA stands for Architect the Risk Management Framework so the organization can meet objectives. Risk management framework might be COSO or it might be ISO 31000. Second, design, tailor the framework to the context of the organization. Third, deploy the framework to the organization's supply chain. Fourth, assure the framework is effective, efficient, and economic in terms of managing risk within the organizational appetite so it can reach its objectives. So let's dive into the 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense, and by the way, this is called an architecture. This is what we do in an organization. We come into an organization and we actually architect this type of defense and tailor it to the organization. Tailoring, another word for that would be designing it. But this example, this framework of 3 lines of defense, actually shows the ADA model in operation. So the first thing we do is we select an architect for this particular framework for an organization. Then we design it, and design would be designed in terms of first line of defense, second and third line. And of course, we could have other types of defense if we had to. We've designed, for example, models that have 6 lines of defense, but that's a little bit beyond this talk. Let's look at the 3 lines of defense architecture. The first line of defense is management controls and internal controls. Second line of defense is financial control, security, and they actually support the first line of defense. The third line of defense is the last part of ADA. It's the assurance function. You can think of that as internal audit, internal quality audit. So let's go into these a little bit deeper. In each one of the slides, when we define that, we're going to be looking at the who's responsible, who has the authority, and how. How do you actually design and deploy this line of defense? Again, the 3 lines of defense are an architecture. Each one of these have to be, first, second, third lines, have to be designed specifically to the organization, specifically to the organizational context. You want to be more precise. So let's dive into it. The who for the first line of defense are all the risk owners. They could be process owners, they could be operational management, they can be people who do the job. The how. How do you implement that? How do you control it? Well, risk owners, the process owners, own and manage the risks. They design and deploy controls that are appropriate to the function. They own the risk procedures and work instructions, and they implement corrective actions. Now the second line of defense. The second line of defense, in terms of who owns it, are line supervisors and managers, risk owners and managers, and even compliance professionals. The purpose of the second line is to support the first line to ensure that the controls are appropriate, they're working effectively, they're economic, and they are efficient. Second line of defense may include, in terms of the who, financial control, security control, risk management, quality management, inspection, and even compliance. How do they do what they're supposed to do? They monitor first-line risk controls. They help build first-line internal controls. They ensure consistency of processes and even develop process controls. They ensure first line is properly designed and deployed, and they provide risk management training and support as necessary to the first line. Now let's look at the third line of defense. The third line of defense is internal audit, which could be internal financial, operational, cyber, and quality audit. The how is they provide objective and independent risk and quality assurance. They normally report to executive management and to the board level executive committee on risk. They report if objectives are being met economically, efficiently, and effectively. They report to executive management and to the board independently. Now, what's the quality auditor? What's the role of the quality auditor as third line defense? The quality auditor provides independent assurance that risk controls are designed properly, that if controls are effectively, efficiently, and economically deployed so that the particular function can meet its objectives. And they provide reasonable assurance that the controls are effective based on the risk appetite of the organization. And of course, they support management policies and procedures. Other roles of quality as the third line auditor include assurance that regulations and requirements are complied with, review risk management framework architecture and design and deployment for effectiveness, review shifts in enterprise explicit and implicit risk appetite, and report stakeholders, including the board of directors, that the above assurances are in place. Now, why have we given this talk, and why do we put so much emphasis on risk management, risk assurance? The biggest challenge, and again, we were involved with the first registrar in North America, AGA, American Gas Association Laboratories in Cleveland. The first CB certification body actually came from BSI out of the UK, but the first U.S. registrar was AGA Labs out of Cleveland. And we did the first training and the first certification with them, going back to 1987, when ISO 9001 was first introduced. And the challenge for quality, and quality assurance and quality auditing all those years was normally, in most organizations, the audit reports went to the director of quality or to a second level manager. We've seen quality audit reports go to a first level supervisor. But what's the challenge is we want our reports to go to executives, senior executives, and to the board of directors audit committee. Now that's shown on the left-hand side. The vertical line on the left shows auditor, lead assessor, sending their report to a manager of systems auditing, then to a director of quality. We want our reports also to go to the chief audit executive, who reports to the chief financial officer, who also sends their reports up to the board of directors. Solid line. In other words, another way to say what we've been saying is we want our management system reports to follow the solid line going to the right, VP, chief audit executive, and eventually to the board of directors. So at this stage, the last step in this report, you're wondering what are next steps? What should you do? How do you bring yourself up to speed? How do you conduct risk-based audits? Great questions. First, purchase ISO 31000 2018. This is the how-to standard to understand management, risk management specifically. Then purchase ISO 19011 2018. This is how-to standard on how to conduct enterprise type audits that are focused on risk. In other words, ISO 19011 2018 focuses on risk-based audits for all management systems. Third thing we recommend is take a look at our CERM Academy Certificate Program, which, by the way, is going to be online this fall. If you're interested in knowing more, purchase our 500-page value-added auditing manual, and you can get it on Amazon. So finally, thank you for listening to us talk about risk-based auditing, and I hope you understand why all management now is based on risk management, including quality management. If you have any thoughts and comments, reach out to us. You can get hold of me at greg@800compete.com or give me a holler, give me a call. I can be reached at 503-233-1012. Anyway, thank you for your time, and if you got questions or comments, please reach out to us.
And thank you, Greg Hutchins, for that look at risk and quality management. That concludes this presentation.